Once Upon a Time in Hollywood earned 10 Oscar nominations this year, including one for costume design, and I'm here with the nominated costume designer herself, Arianne Phillips. I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby, and first off, Arianne, this was your first collaboration with Quentin Tarantino, and I'm very curious to know how you got involved there and whether the experience lived up to your expectations going into it.
Thank you, Kevin, first of all, for having me. I'm a big fan of the Gold Derby, so I'm happy to be here and happy to talk to the Gold Derby audience. Hi, everyone. I'm here at my home in Hollywood. Well, it was like a twist of fate being able to be the costume designer on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I actually was working on another film with Jim Mangold, who I have done 5 films with, and we're working on another film actually about Patty Hearst. Mm-hmm. And it was about a month into prep, the producer on that movie, on the Patty Hearst movie, said, you best get into the costume house and pull all your 60s stock, and stock is term we use for we amass a lot of period costumes for background players for fittings. And he said, for our big crowd scenes, he said, oh, you better get in there because Quentin Tarantino is doing a film in the same time period. So I was hustling that first month to get in the costume house. And that was 2018, January 2018. And shortly after the Golden Globes and the Time's Up red carpet, Oprah Winfrey had made a very memorable speech. I'm sure everyone will remember, very empowering speech. And Patty Hearst came out herself and made a statement against a docuseries that was being produced by CNN and also the movie we were working on. So the movie literally went down in a day. And I called my agent to say, hey, I don't have a job anymore. The movie's over. I was devastated because I thought, we were going to make this incredible kind of unbiased film in a time period that was so important to me because I'm a Californian. I was raised in Northern California. So I quickly pivoted and I said to my agent, his name's Wayne, can you find out about Quentin Tarantino's movie? And the reason why I asked is because Quentin's last costume designer on The Hateful Eight is a very good friend of mine, Courtney Hoffman. I hadn't been in touch with her, but Courtney's gone on to be a director, and Quentin's been like a mentor of hers and really supportive. So I knew she wouldn't be designing this film, whatever it was called, whatever it was about. So lucky for me, the film Quentin hadn't gone into production quite yet. He was just about to, and my timing was perfect, and I was able to get, excuse me, my timing was perfect, and I was able to get an interview. So that's how it came to be. And, I'm a huge Quentin Tarantino fan. I've seen every one of his movies at least once, or at least twice, I should say. And so this was kind of, to be in this position was something I didn't imagine could actually happen. So that's how I ended up coming to it. And I got to read the script, actually to go to the office to read a script. There was the Hateful Eight script apparently was leaked initially. So the script, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, was kept kind of under lock and key at the office. And I had to go and read it. And it was nerve-wracking because I couldn't bring my phone and I couldn't have a pencil and paper, so I couldn't make any notes. And I knew that this was in advance of having a meeting with Quentin, and I knew I wanted to put together a presentation for him. But lucky for me, the script, Quentin's script, was unlike anything I'd ever read before in terms of another script. It really reads like a novel and just so rich with character detail and the detail of Los Angeles, and I was able to absorb it. It was miraculous. And of course, when I left, the office after reading the script, I scribbled notes in my car, and that became the inspiration for my presentation. I had a meeting with Quentin, sent over my presentation. Then I had a meeting with Quentin, and the rest was history.
Yeah. Well, talk to us about talk to us about the research you put into this time period, because I imagine like it was extensive going back to 1969 Los Angeles, all those looks. Talk us through that research process.
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things that was so apparent reading Quentin's script was this story was really about changing Hollywood. Here we have Rick Dalton, an aging actor who was a late 50s, early 60s cowboy TV star who was trying to make the transition to film. And he finds himself pretty much redundant with his stuntman, Cliff Booth. And it was really about showing that change of Hollywood, how Hollywood had kind of changed and Rick Dalton hasn't. Mm-hmm. And being able to show that change, I knew from reading the script the first time, was going to be a wonderful opportunity for me as a costume designer to show that change just in how people were dressed and, you know, whether it was, you know, conservative Hollywood, hip Hollywood, or the hippies in Hollywood, or Spahn Ranch, or Manson family. So I knew it would be very rich, not only that, but also the kind of on-screen personas that we see with Rick Dalton's character, Leo's character, from the Green Hornet to Hullabaloo to Lancer to Bounty Law. I mean, being able to do a Western with Quentin was like a bucket list. And so we had, I honestly, it was like doing two Westerns, Bounty Law and Lancer, in, you know, all encapsulated in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So there was a lot of research to be done. And at the end of our initial interview with Quentin, or actually it wasn't our interview, because after I got the job, Quentin kind of casually handed me this list of reference of television shows from that era, movies. And he's like, you know, you should have a look at these, which was exciting because research is everything for a costume designer. And, you know, this story was just not only those TV shows and movies, but also the fact that there were all these real people, real places, real events, you know, everyone from, of course, Sharon Tate, Roman Polanski, Jay Sebring, to Bruce Lee, Mama Cass, Michelle Phillips, Steve McQueen, on and on. That biographical research I was really excited about doing. I've worked on other biographical films. But then at the center of that, at the center of this story, which makes it so unique, are two fictitious characters, Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth, and who are really an amalgamation of guys at that time that Quentin kind of masterfully crafted to represent the change in Hollywood. And it was so wonderful. So it was just becoming fluent in that world and that time, you know, like pop culture, politically, socioeconomically, everything that was going on in and around Los Angeles culture. And, you know, being that I'm the same age as Quentin, I was raised in Northern California, and like Quentin, who was raised outside of Los Angeles, we both would, you know, I used to come to LA. Both my grandparents lived here, both sets of grandparents and all my relatives. So I would come to LA and we would go see a movie at the Cinerama Dome, or we'd go to Grauman's Chinese Theater to see the handprints in the cement. And, you know, reading Quentin's script, I really got that kind of like sense memory experience from his perspective, and talking to him, learning that he too had similar relationship with Hollywood as a 7-8-year-old in 1969, which is how old we were. So I really felt a synergy, and that I really understood the story that Quentin wanted to tell, and was really struck by kind of the emotional quality of this film, and being able to tell the story about kind of Los Angeles losing its innocence with the Manson murders. And I'd always known about them and heard stories that, you know, basically after the Manson murders, everyone started locking their doors, and it was like a real defining change in Hollywood. So being part of a story about Hollywood set around these events was a great It's epic. There's a lot to harness and really exciting. We had so many speaking parts. We had, almost 140 some odd speaking parts, 120 locations. So I knew that every day would be a new day in that, as a costume designer, every time a new costume works, I'll be on set. And I love that idea of being able to actually see Quentin at work and be on set with him. Because as a costume designer, if I'm working on a movie where a character, it takes place in one day, then I'm not on set as much. I'm usually running back to the office to do fittings. So I was really excited to actually be on Quentin's set.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you end up settling on just the specific looks for Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth? Because like you said, they're fictitious characters. Is there something specific about the script on the page that something spoke to you about, like, the brown look for Rick Dalton and then the t-shirt and the Hawaiian shirt for Cliff Booth?
Yeah, well, Quentin has so many wonderful details in his script, and he really, when I was after reading the script the first time, I really felt that I understood Rick Dalton. I understood who Cliff Booth was. It was just a matter of kind of filling in the blanks with Quentin. And Quentin had spent a lot of time with Leo and Brad. Of course, they had worked together, both of them, on Django and Inglourious Bastards. So he had, which is also a huge asset, that the actors already had a camaraderie with the director. But basically, anybody who's asked to be involved in a Quentin Tarantino film is thrilled to be here, trust me. But the work, they had done a lot of work together beforehand. So by the time I was hired, Quentin had created these incredible backstories on who they are. And, costumes really illustrate character and identity, right? They give the audience visual clues of who these guys are, what they're about, how they see themselves, how they want the world, they want to present themselves in the world. And with Rick Dalton's character, kind of like when I worked on Walk the Line, Johnny Cash's character, played by Joaquin Phoenix, it's similar in that we have the kind of on-stage and off-stage persona of Rick Dalton. So we see the on-stage, so to speak, as the on-camera persona in all these TV shows. So those were the costumes that we focused with first in the fittings. We worked on, I think, Bounty Lawn Lancer costumes first. And that was nerve-wracking for me, just getting in Quentin's head and wanting to really do the best job possible creating these Western characters, because I'm such a fan of Hateful Eight and Django, and Quentin is a expert on and has a specific aesthetic when it comes to Western. So that was really exciting, and watching an actor become the character in a fitting is really the stuff that keeps, is what I love about a costume designer. And that's no exception with Leonardo or with Brad. With that first fitting with Leo, we really figured out who Rick was, and together, and you kind of, I have stuff made, in advance of fittings. I have a lot of conversations based on kind of, who that guy is, who Rick Dalton is. There are a lot of great details in the script, and we kind of, over the course of many meetings, Quentin and I would discuss, who Rick Dalton was, that maybe even wasn't even in the story, his backstory, and all that kind of feeds me in preparation of the costumes. So when it comes to those first fittings, I have prototypes there that I've made. I have some vintage pieces that I use as inspiration that maybe I'll recreate, appropriate for our film. And Leo has just under 30 changes in this film. So even though you said the brown looks, he has a couple, I think he has 3 brown leather jackets. I know that they've become very identifiable. They actually has quite a few costumes. And the same with Brad as Cliff Booth. That Hawaiian shirt has really taken on a life of its own.
Mm-hmm.
It was written in the script. Quentin did write a Hawaiian shirt when he was describing what Cliff was wearing. And when I read that, that was a signifier immediately. It was so exciting. It's like, that is a Tarantinoism. You know, that's part of Quentin's cinematic language, his vernacular. We've seen other characters, Tim Roth, Christian Slater, and other pieces he's done wearing Hawaiian shirts. But what the Hawaiian shirt was, what color it was, what the motif was kind of up for grabs. And, you know, how we came about, you know, these are two very different guys. And I think it's kind of encapsulated in the shoes they wear. So you see Rick Dalton wears cowboy boots. So Quentin and I created this story that he never bothered to buy his own clothes. He just kind of took clothes from the sets he worked on. And those were probably cowboy boots he had from Bounty Law or Lancer. So that was, and also that I love the idea of Rick Dalton wearing cowboy boots in his own life as kind of a bravado, like a badass quality. You know, this kind of almost defensiveness of like, you know, this fading kind of Western star and keeping his, you know, machismo alive through that. You know, when you wear a pair of cowboy boots, it makes you feel kind of tough and strong. And then on the flip side of that, Cliff Booth, who is truly a badass. We don't know exactly his past. It's inferred that maybe he killed his wife. We don't really know. We know that when we see him on the set of Green Hornet, which is a flashback, we see the Kurt Russell character, you know, saying, hey, like, you know, you make my wife uncomfortable. And he's an outsider, right? But he's a stuntman. So he's wearing denim, which is an extension of workwear at the time. It's a guy who falls off buildings, rides horses, and a cowboy stuntman, you know, as stuntmen do. So as an extension of that, and had the idea of him having moccasins. It wasn't scripted, but we had the idea of him wearing moccasins for a couple reasons. One, because of that kind of relationship to being kind of a cowboy stuntman. A little nod to Cliff being maybe a little bit more hip with the times, you know, the kind of hippie fashions. And I love the idea of Cliff having a soft shoe as opposed to like a tough boot, which is what you kind of expect for a stuntman. And I remember seeing a lot of photos of Steve McQueen wearing moccasins, and I just thought that's kind of the most badass thing, because you really truly have to be confident to wear those shoes. They're soft. It's like the next best thing to being barefoot. So those really, and knowing that both the moccasins and cowboy boots would be well photographed, because Quentin is famous for his feet shots. I knew it wouldn't be lost on us. So I felt like that was like the beginning building blocks of who the characters were. And really, you know, shoes really inform how a character holds themselves. And luckily Quentin and Brad and Leo and everyone was on board. And that's kind of the story of like how it came to be. But it's a process, you know, that there's a belt buckle that I found in the bottom of a box at Western Costume or Warner Brothers Costume that says Stuntman's Association. And I had never seen one before. I said, oh, this is the perfect belt buckle for Cliff Booth. It was a belt buckle that if you were a stuntman, you could have ordered through the Stuntman's Association. And they were popular at the time. And Brad loved it. It was kind of like a little, you know, it's really great to give the actors little talismans to kind of help them kind of access their character. I would say the stuntman belt buckle is really intrinsic for Cliff's character, and the medallion that Rick wears that I had made with the monogram on it, the R, for Rick, on that he wears on his neck, which is kind of like he also wears a pinky ring, a lion pinky ring, kind of like a little bit of a force of ego guy who's showing his stature. And I would say also with Margot, the jewelry she wore in the movie was kind enough to be loaned to us by Deborah Tate, Sharon Tate's sister, who was a consultant on the film. And she was kind enough to loan us a few pieces of Sharon's jewelry some rings and some earrings that actually Margot wore every single day on the film, which was kind of a touchstone for us and a reminder of this beautiful woman's story that we were telling, and not just the tragedy that everybody remembers her for.
Yeah, absolutely. That was going to be my next question. So thank you for answering that too. So we're already running out of time, but just really fast at the end here, I wanted to ask, there's a lot of strong costume design this year, not just in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but your fellow nominees in this category, Jojo Rabbit, Little Women, Joker, The Irishman. And I was looking earlier, and I don't know if you knew this, but like most of the people you're nominated with, you've actually been nominated with before. You have Jacqueline Duran, Sandy Powell, Mark Bridges, all people you've competed against before. So what does it mean for you to just be in the company of all of them together again?
Yeah, I mean, having an Oscar nomination is like the ultimate, because you're being nominated by your peers. Mm-hmm. And lucky for me, being nominated with my friends, right? So Jackie Duran, Mark Bridges, Sandy Powell, and Christopher Peterson, who actually co-designed Irishman with Nancy, who this is his first Oscar nomination. I've gotten to know him recently. But Sandy and Mark are friends, and Jackie I've known for a long time. We were both nominated for the first time when I was nominated for Walk the Line, and her, I think it was Atonement. Or maybe it was Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice, yeah.
Yeah, she won for Atonement later. And Maze Rubio, who I'm a huge fan of her work for Jojo Rabbit, and I believe it's her first nomination. And Maze is just such a talented designer, and I'm a big fan of hers. And the great thing is, like, leading up to the nominations, we have the opportunity to hang out. So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone. And I've seen Mark and Sandy a couple times, and I'm looking forward to seeing Maze and Jackie along the route. And it's really great. And I think the nominations this time are really exciting because they are untraditional in a way. Like if you look at The Irishman, Joker, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and even Jojo Rabbit, they are, usually these big period costume films are nominated, and we see them winning, are big fantasy films. And, I absolutely love the costumes for Little Women. And actually, I think they have a modernism to them that makes they stand apart even from traditional period costume. So I think costume designers are getting more thoughtful about who they're voting for. A film like The Joker and Irishman, where it's there aren't any dresses, so to speak, which is and barely any dresses in my film. I think it's dresses in quotes. I think it's really encouraging, and people vote and nominate for different reasons. Sometimes it's for the plain scale and epic quality of a film and how many costume, the logistical harness. Some people vote for the budget if they don't have a lot of money. Other people vote for just the aesthetics, something that's beautiful and pleasing. My own personal criteria is character development and how the stories moved along, and how costumes underscore and help tell the story and move the story. So that's my criteria, but there's no rules, right? Everybody votes for what they think deserves it. And honestly, having been through this before, having a nomination is the win straight away. And it's a super big honor, and not just for me at all, but for everyone I know, everyone, like my teachers from fourth grade, my parents, my sister, my nephews, my boyfriend, everyone. So, and that's really like, and all the people who worked with me and my crew. So I feel like I'm representing, basically. So I'm proud to represent.
Yeah, sounds like you have a good sense of community there. That's really nice.
Yeah.
Well, Arianne, thank you so much for talking to Gold Derby today. And congratulations again on your nomination, as well as your Gold Derby Award nomination, for that matter.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm very happy. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if you like this video, hit like and subscribe, and head over to goldderby.com to make your predictions. All right. Thanks again.